Greetings, commanders, and welcome on in to our second ever narrative roundtable stream. This one is going to be focusing on the Azimuth Saga, which is very exciting. So, first of all, thank you everybody in the chat for joining us. You'll see that we've got some pretty esteemed guests with us this evening. We'll get to them very shortly. But first of all, welcome on in everybody who we got in the chat. We've got Millstone Barn, hello. Psychic, hello. Captain Flint, hello. Osric on YouTube. We've got Torchy from Huddersfield specifically, welcome on in. Sidewinder40, hello. From CrispyTaytorTot emotes in the chat, which is good to see. Nice, welcome on in everybody. So, first things first, I will introduce my usual partner in crime, Mr. Bruce Garrido. How are you doing today, Bruce?
07 Zach and everybody. I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you doing?
Not bad. Excited as always for these streams.
Yeah, super excited for this one. Like you said, we have three wonderful guests who we'll introduce in a minute. But yeah, welcome everyone to our second narrative roundtable stream where we're going to go over some of the lore. This one is on a specific topic, the Azimuth Saga. So yeah, I'm super excited to get into all of that stuff with our guests.
Yep. Okay, so I guess without further ado then, let's introduce our guests. So first of all, in the middle of your screens, we've got Mr. CrispyTaytorTot. How are you doing today, Crispy?
I am doing great. It's wonderful to be here.
Nice. I guess for anyone who doesn't know you, Crispy, can you give us a sort of quick intro, rundown of what happens on your channel?
On my Twitch channel, we play Elite Dangerous, other space games, and we have fun doing it.
Nice. I mean, you do a lot of... you help a lot with Operation IDA and that kind of thing, don't you? What are you I dubbed you this, right? I forgot what it was, but... An evangelist, right?
The Operation IDA evangelist, yes.
Yeah. So if you want to see some of that kind of content on Twitch, check out TatorTot. ! Guests in the chat. If you're on Twitch, we'll give you a link to both of all three of our guests' channels this evening. So thank you for joining us, Crispy. Who else have we got? We've got in the bottom right of your screens, we've got BeetleJude, who is probably quite a familiar name to a lot of you, but probably for multiple reasons. So BeetleJude, hello, welcome on in. Welcome on. I guess, so a lot of people, BeetleJude, probably know you from the art that is sort of very popular amongst the Elite Dangerous community, right? I'm bigging you up here, but it's really like, we love to see it every time that we see it on Reddit or you send them in on Twitter, etc., etc. You've got a lot of fans here at Frontier and in the chat, it looks like.
I like colouring things in. Yeah, no, it's nice. It's like engaging with the game in a creative way for me because.
Yeah, it's great. So aside from the artwork, you're also a part of Galnet News Digest alongside Wotherspoon, who we'll get to very shortly. Can you give us a quick overview of what that is if someone wants to check out Galnet News Digest? What is it?
It's the news, but kind of like processed and made sense of, and given a more thought through, slightly more or less coherent and reasonably accurate take, and sometimes slightly witty, occasionally, very occasionally. Yeah. I don't write it. I mean, don't ask me.
That's all right.
I just read bits of that out.
We'll ask Wotherspoon.
No, but
as well
it's great. I enjoy it immensely, and yes,
nice.
It's good fun.
Yeah, welcome on in. And finally, in the bottom left of your screens today, we've got Commander Wotherspoon, also part of Galnet News Digest. Welcome on in.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you, and thank you for inviting me on.
That's all right. So I guess we've already talked a bit about Galnet News Digest, but let's give me the rundown of the separation. What do you do, Wotherspoon? What does BeetleJude do? How does that work?
Okay. Right, so we make a podcast which goes out twice a week, and we do videos which go out whenever there's some news. Typically, I will find the stories, write the stories out, sort of. Then Jude and I will record different parts of the stories, compile them together, and then BeetleJude sort of will do the sort of like the thumbnails and some of the artwork for the video, and I do some as well, and we sort of squish it all together and upload it, and and hopefully people watch it and enjoy it.
Nice.
But I do like watching BeetleJude's own channel as well, because that's a completely different style of thing. It's much slower, sort of slow radio type thing. It's very nice.
Very nice. Yeah, so welcome on in, everybody. Bruce, so we've got our stream tonight. We've decided, the first one we did chat, it was very open-ended, which we wanted it to be. But me and Bruce had a chat, and we based it off your feedback. So, Bruce, what can we expect tonight in terms of the stream and what we're going to be talking about, that kind of thing?
So last time we had a very lovely free-form conversation with our guests, and that was great. We covered a lot of topics and dove into some things very specifically. However, this time we wanted to add a little bit more direction and structure. I think last time we ran afoul of just how much lore and content there is to go through.
Yeah.
So this time we've added a bit of a framework. We're going to talk about the Azimuth Saga specifically. So for anyone who's not familiar, that's what we're calling the sort of main, if you will, narrative that's running at the moment, the sort of key storyline that you'll be interacting with through CGs and reading about in Galnet and that kind of thing. So we're going to talk about the key sort of figures and events, as well as a rough idea of the timeline, just to give you an idea of what it is, and then maybe, well, hopefully encourage you to get involved with it if you haven't done so already.
Indeed. So, chat, should we get started? I'm seeing if you've got any questions, chat. I'll be looking throughout the stream. If something pops up that I feel I can add to the conversation that you've added, chat, I'll shout that out. But
I have one quick question before we start, actually. So we mentioned the Galnet News Digest. Sorry, for anyone who hasn't tuned in before, Wotherspoon, could you tell our lovely audience where they might find you?
Galnet News Digest is on YouTube primarily now. It's been going for 5 years. So we started in 3302, and that was as a podcast. It's still available as a podcast. So if you search on your podcast app for Galnet News Digest, you'll find it there. But also if you look on YouTube now, we do sort of some quite pretty videos with lots of pretty graphics and sort of lovely in-game shots to accompany the news stories. So if you're finding the news story a bit boring and you're glazing over, you can look at the pretty pictures instead.
Brilliant. I'd like to see Moobot's actually posted the link in chat as well. So,
thank you.
Yes, just wanted to make sure we adequately plugged our guests' channels.
Absolutely. Yeah, so obviously, chat, make sure to go and check out those channels, either right now and subscribe and then come back, or wait until the end of the show and then head over there. So, all right then, let's start. So I'm going to be playing the game in the background, just doing a bit of flying about while our guests and we have a chat. So don't worry too much about what you're seeing on screen. It's just sort of, some nice background visuals. But let's just get straight into it. So this whole story revolves mostly so far around two parties, and we're going to be talking about these two parties quite a lot throughout this. So we just want to give a brief, I guess, a brief catch up. If you're new to the story and you don't know who these people are, you might hear some things that you don't know. This is just a quick sort of summary. So Aegis is a big part of this story, and Aegis is sort of a come together of the three major superpowers to research technology, specifically against the Thargoids, right? So Aegis, I guess, I'm going to throw this out quickly to the group. We're not going to spend too much time here, but I guess one word answer. We'll start with BeetleJude. Aegis, are they competent? Yes or no?
Previously competent, underfunded. That's not one word, is it?
No, that's not one word. I'm going to push you for a one-word answer. Yes or no?
Acompetent.
Right. Okay. Well, we'll move on. I guess that is one. That's the one-word answer. TatorTot. Yes or no? Are Aegis competent? No. Straight no from TatorTot. And Wotherspoon. Yes or no?
No, they're not. Most of the senior guys have left already, haven't they?
Mm-hmm.
So they're a bit rudderless at the moment.
Yeah. Chat. Give me a yes or no in the chat. Are Aegis competent? Let me see what they say. No from TatorTot, who's also in the chat. No from Smiley Dank. No. Train Freak. Psychic, no. Thought no. A lot of no's here, Bruce.
Yeah, there's certainly a disturbing lack of faith in Aegis everywhere, it seems.
Yeah, we'll talk about this later, because maybe there was a sort of turning point when this happened when people started to become less competent. So maybe we'll talk about that later on. But that's Aegis. They're a big sort of, a big group. They're quite official. So that's one side of this story. And the other side is a character called Salvation, who is quite a character of mystery, and still is so. So I don't want to talk too much about, what Salvation is or who Salvation is. But I guess let's start with... That's the same question, actually. In fact, no, we won't. I'm going to ask this question. BeetleJude, is Salvation trustworthy? Yes or no? No? That's a no from BeetleJude. TaytorTot?
No.
No? Okay. Wotherspoon?
We don't know enough about Salvation. Not trustworthy.
Not trustworthy, so that's 3 no's again in the... Bruce? Yes, no?
Well, the chat is also saying no. So what we've gleaned so far is that the community seems to be... there seems to be a healthy cynicism towards both Aegis and Salvation, which is probably fair.
Okay, so we'll talk a lot more about Salvation in the next 50 minutes or so. So if you are new to the story, what we're going to do now is we're going to sort of go through it as much as possible in a sort of timeline sense. So we're going to start from the very beginning of the story and sort of work our way through it and talk about some of the main points and maybe some theories and opinions and that kind of thing. So you'll also notice if you're on Twitch, !Azimuth will send you to the forum post that Bruce made up, which is the story so far for the Azimuth. So if you are new to that, I would recommend maybe bringing that up and putting it on your second monitor or something while we go through this. It might be useful. But if you're on YouTube, that will be on the news and bulletin section of the Elite Dangerous forum. But yeah, without further ado then, I'll switch into the game and start flying around. I'm actually going to be flying around the Adamastor. So to begin the discussion then, we'll hand over to Crispy for this. So Crispy, this is the start of the story, right? This is where everything began. But maybe we didn't know that at this point that this story was going to come from the Adamastor, etc., etc. Can you give us a quick overview of this whole Adamastor scenario and what happened, what came about?
Yeah, absolutely. So it was last Halloween, or just before Halloween. It was for the Halloween event. The Adamastor had returned to the Chukchan system, and the Adamastor was a ship that was basically a ghost ship. No one was there when we got there. Through that, we discovered Geological Base 23, which was discovered in the Coalsack Nebula. Lots of barnacle sites out there now, and a crashed SRV. Pretty cool site to go check out if you have not been there yet. And that's kind of where the story kind of took off with Azimuth Biochemicals. They had diverted the Adamastor to pick up something. We weren't really sure what it was. And we also discovered that there was a crashed Sidewinder, which was escaped from the Adamastor. We're not really sure what was going on with there.
Yeah, that's a pretty fair summary. So I guess at this point, I guess we'll cut to Wotherspoon. At this point, did you have any initial theory? What were you thinking at this point with the Adamastor? Anything? Nothing?
Well, okay, we discovered this site in Muscadark region, and there were a number of different things there. There was the Adamastor had been there. There are some logs which describe what happened when the Adamastor was there. There's the geological base. There's a load of barnacle sites, and there's an abandoned SRV, which in Horizons used to be right beside one of the barnacle sites, but in Odyssey has moved 20 kilometers away from it. So somebody's been moving SRVs around. And the logs that you can read there are really interesting. It's the geological survey has turned up there. They've discovered these barnacles, and they're kind of, what are these weird things? They're not anything. They look organic, and then sort of Thargoids start descending from the sky and sort of sucking up meta-alloys from the barnacles, and some of the people on the survey find this absolutely mesmerizing, absolutely wonderful. But Azimuth Biochemicals discovered about this, and the Azimuth, sorry, what's the name of the Adamastor, which was heading off towards Barnard's Star, very suddenly got diverted, headed out to this place, started to pick up what was apparently something that came out of a crashed scout, a Thargoid scout spaceship. We don't know what that was. It might have been what I still think of as unknown artifacts, or it might have been the pilot of the ship. But they picked it up, they put it on board, and then a whole bunch of other people started firing at the Azimuth employees, took over the ship, and sailed off with this thing on board. And then Professor Carver sort of takes up the story. She escaped in the Sidewinder that Crispy mentioned, and she describes how everybody on board sort of was kind of going a bit crazy, and the frameshift drive was failing on the megaship, and it was all going completely wrong. There was something weird on board the Adamastor that was making it go wrong. Yeah. So she escapes in the Sidewinder, and unfortunately crashed. And then the Adamastor made its way home at sublight speeds, eventually arriving back on autopilot 194 years later, which was in October last year. So what did we know about that? We knew that there was Thargoid stuff, and it was early Thargoid stuff, very early Thargoid stuff, and that's really exciting. This is one of the first documented meetings with Thargoids, and we also know that Adamastor and somebody else are really, really keen to get their hands on this stuff.
Mm-hmm. So
okay,
yeah, and that's a pretty good summary. I mean, this was So you said it was October last year, so it was the Halloween event, right, Bruce? That the ghost ship showed back up.
Yeah, it was. I'm interested to know, Pete, but also feel free to chime in, BeetleJude and Crispy. Do we have any theories as to what was on the ship that caused the strange effects on the not inhabitants, the crew, or even what was found in the downed Thargoid scout?
I don't. I mean, it could have been a Thargoid probe. It could have been the pilot. I can't think of anything else that we know of that it could have been. We know that the Thargoid technology can cause ships to go faulty, which is why we have the corrosion-resistant cargo racks, because otherwise ships begin to go faulty. But what made everyone go crazy on board? I don't know. No idea.
Any other theories?
It was at the stones, wasn't it? He's watching the stones. He went nuts at the stones with the whatever was there, and that was the barnacles being harvested at that point. That's when your SRV guy wasn't called Murphy, was he? No, that was somebody else. He went nuts too, though, didn't he?
He did.
They all did. They all went mad. Anyway, yeah, it's not good for you, is it?
Not TatorTot. Any theories on this?
Well, I would imagine that this. I mean, we know that this is one of the first encounters with Thargoids. I would imagine anyone that's not familiar with that kind of stuff might go a little mad just seeing a Thargoid ship. That they're quite a sight to be seen.
That's true, actually. That is a good point.
It could just be something as simple as that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like that idea.
Yeah, I think of all the theories, I like that one, and I'm not going to say anything. I just like that one from TatorTot. That the sort of even the thought of coming across an alien species of that sort of scale and what's the word, sort of so separate to humans would cause them to just lose their mind. I think that's brilliant.
It's very Lovecraftian, isn't it?
It is.
The idea of encountering something so horrific that it bends your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was the sort of start of the story. Before we move on, does anyone else have anything they want to mention about the Adamastor, or should we move straight on to the next part?
The only thing that's worth mentioning is that that area has now been colonized by the Alliance. They have Beatoncourt base there, and it is definitely worth going and having a look around. Land on the planet, look at the barnacle sites. With a bit of luck, you'll see a Thargoid coming down to harvest them. It's definitely worth a visit.
100%. Okay, so that was the sort of very, very beginning, or the sort of prelude to Act 1. So next up, we want to talk a bit about Crispy. Can you give us a rundown of, I guess this is the first introduction to Salvation. This is when Salvation first came into the story, right? Something happened here.
Right. So, dredgers had discovered the Hesperus, which was the sister ship of the Adamastor, and it's way out there. I can't remember the exact system that we found it in, but it's hundreds of light years away.
It was certainly a mission to find that. I remember when it happened.
It was. I didn't participate in that myself because I know that there's a lot better people that are a lot better at coordinating that kind of stuff. But we eventually found it, and the dredgers had told us that we were to stay away from it. They were taking it as legitimate salvage, and once you got there, you got a message from a then unknown person by the name of Salvation.
Yeah, and it's also worth noting that Salvation guided players or commanders to the Hesperus too, right? So somehow Salvation knew where it was, right? Or they had an idea of where the Hesperus was. How do you think that was possible, Tator? Like, any ideas?
The only thing I can think of is that Salvation knew where it was to begin with, and they're kind of running like they're kind of running a game for us or something to try and find
Interesting. It's like a social experiment almost.
Something like that. So I just think they're very dodgy.
Interesting. We'll get more into this soon. Wotherspoon, I can see you making some facial expressions throughout this topic. What are your thoughts? Go on.
I find this really fascinating. Yes, Salvation sort of woke up the one of the unused beacons in the Adamastor and told commanders to go searching for the sister ship. It seems to me that Salvation, I mean, in those messages, Salvation says that I am going to save you from the Thargoids. So Salvation knows that there is something that can save us from the Thargoids, which means that Salvation already knows that there is some weapons research going on, which is what we'll be getting onto in a little while. And the only way that there are two ways that I can think of. Either they managed to get some information from the Adamastor, which is a possibility, that nobody else managed to find, that the Alliance salvage people didn't manage to find, and that we didn't manage to find. Or they already have contacts with Azimuth Biochemicals or Pharmasapien. So my horrible suspicion is that Salvation might actually be one of those Azimuth people. If that's true, then that completely inverts they're a really nice guy who's gonna sort of save mankind into they're someone who's using us to develop a death ray.
Interesting. BeetleJude, what are your thoughts on that theory? Before we go back to the main story, I'm interested. What are your thoughts on that theory, or do you have your own theory on Salvation and what or who they are?
Yeah, I totally think he's involved with Azimuth. I think he's in some way. I mean, he's just happened to be knocking around near the Adamastor and happened to know exactly where to find the sister ship and happens to know how to find Thargoids in advance. And I was reminded of the Eagle Eye network, which was supposed to be able to tell you where Thargoid attacks were going on, and then the ground to an ignominious end and sort of stopped working at some point for no apparent reason. That the Thargs worked it out and stopped the systems functioning in some way, so their megaships don't do what they're supposed to anymore. But I wonder whether or not he's got some sort of system somewhere, some special fleet carrier decked out with all the great, ham radios in the back to find out exactly where stuff is. I don't know.
I've seen that theory going around a lot as well. I've also seen a theory that Tokoso has put in chat quite a lot. They said, I thought Salvation was an AI at first.
Yeah.
Any agreements, disagreement?
That's a possibility, isn't it? It's one of the things that is a loose end in the story. That the Guardians had artificial intelligence. They got wiped out by their own artificial intelligence, in fact, because they'd been fighting the Thargoids, and they developed this fantastic AI, and it eventually turned on them and wiped them out as well. So they won the war against the Thargoids, but it wasn't. It was a bit of a Pyrrhic victory. So that's one AI. Then there's other potential AI which have been mentioned in stories once or twice. The Federation developing AI and so on. So these are all possibilities. I don't know. I mean, that sounds sort of less plausible to me. To me, the AI that we have in Guardian sites is the Sentinels, which aren't particularly threatening. There may be another bigger AI sort of lurking out there in the distance, but I don't know. I mean, so going back to that original sort of Church of the Eternal Void. This was back in 3303, I think it was, when the Thargoids first turned up. There were different sort of religious groups formed, pro-Thargoid and pro-Guardian sites, and one of the things that I think they talked about was that that the Guardians may see humanity as not worthy of saviour. And that word, which appears in one of the Galness articles back in 3303, sort of strikes me as being, well, I wonder if that's something to do with salvation. Salvation is the Guardians helping us out. It's not really a theory I subscribe to. I can think of other people who could much more likely be, like Thomas Dorn, who we haven't got onto yet. He might be salvation, or Ramta, or Professor Palin might be salvation. There are a few people who might be salvation, but I don't really have any sort of good sort of theory. I don't have enough evidence to be able to say one way or the other yet.
That's fair. TatorTot, I guess you've been quite silent on this. What are your thoughts? Give us your main theory on salvation.
I'm subscribed to the theory that salvation is an AI. I think it kind of just would make sense. I noticed someone in chat kind of just sparked something that I hadn't noticed either. Smiley Dank said salvation also says words like humanity instead of us, which kind of adds to that being an AI. And they've just known so many things that it's plausible that there's just like this supercomputer AI that's just doing all these calculations and figuring out exactly how this plan is going to work. I think that'd be pretty cool if that's how it turned out to be.
That's certainly I think that is one of the theories that I've seen the most. Just generally around the sort of forums and social, a lot of people are on that sort of mindset at the minute, and we won't say anything either way. It's just it is an interesting theory, though. I do like it. Okay, so carrying on that story. So I'm trying to remember where we got up to. So Salvation asked people to go and check out the Hesperus. The dredgers were there, which was our first discovery of the dredgers in a very long time. I think they were around in the original beta of Elite Dangerous, but this is the first time that they were here in the live game, especially in lore. It's a long time since we've seen them, and they sort of, they were doing the usual stuff. They were salvaging the Hesperus, etc., etc. You could do some scanning and find out some lore there, which is interesting. But so I guess you know what. Let's move on. I'm looking at the time. Go on.
Can I just say one thing? One of the things that happened at this time is the Pilots Federation of all people, of all organizations, issued a warning that we shouldn't work with Salvation, and I do not understand that for the life of me. The Pilots Federation is supposed to be the union, the club of commanders within the galaxy. Why on earth would it take a stance against Salvation? I really don't understand that.
Any ideas? Any theories on that?
I told Wotherspoon my theory earlier, and he mocked me cruelly. So.
Oh, go on, tell me.
No, that was talking about how. But you pointed out that Laurie Jameson has absolutely nothing to do with the Pilots Federation herself. She's the engineer at Shinrata. She's not the faction at Shinrata, and she's not actually John Jameson.
She's not, but she is descended from him. That's very true. Yes. And so my God, virus.
Her
and all
opinion
that sort
on
of stuff.
Thargoids. Yeah. But anyway, yes, it was a random. What's the word?
Might have influenced.
Tangent.
Yeah.
Elevator music in the chat says the Pilots Federation is not to be trusted. TaytorTot, do you agree or disagree with that?
I trust the Pilots Federation. I think they set out to work with Salvation just because it's a character that was new and they weren't familiar with who they were. So it's good to be cautious.
Yeah, I think that's a standard. I think that's fine, Wotherspoon. Do you not agree with that?
Perhaps.
They issue the pilots' licenses, don't they?
Yeah,
they don't want their pilots coming home in rags with sidewinders.
They don't want to keep giving out free sidewinders. Exactly.
Okay.
Fair.
So yeah, before we move on to the next act, anything else that I've missed there that anyone else wants to quickly bring up, or are we good to move on?
Well, I think we just made some really good points about Salvation. The fact that he has appeared out of nowhere, or seems to have appeared out of nowhere, with no history to sort of speak of, lends itself to a sort of untrustworthiness.
Mm-hmm.
And beyond that, it's not the first time that we've heard of sort of grander plans to take on or even wipe out the Thargoids. That's sort of got a dark history to it as well. So I don't know if anyone's sort of drawn those connections before.
Yeah, I mean that would then go back to Jameson, wouldn't it, John Jameson? And that incredible story, which you can still see if you find the crashed Sidewinder. You can still read all about that and listen to it, where the first Thargoid War was finished by a bunch of people called INRA, the Intergalactic Naval Reserve Arm, who convinced John Jameson to take a virus that would wipe out the Thargoid race. They told him that it was just going to damage their spaceships so they couldn't travel across distances. But it actually did a fair job of wiping out a big chunk of the Thargoids. And INRA were definitely not to be trusted because they fiddled with Jameson's Cobra and he lost power and it crashed into a planet. And the logs are rather tragic and wonderful to listen to. But yeah, we can't trust the INRA, the INRA, and can we trust sort of Aegis? I mean, a lot of people think that Aegis is the spiritual successor to the INRA, and yeah. Definitely sort of morally suspect.
Yep, I think again that's something I've seen a lot of people subscribe to that theory. Right, okay, I'm going to move us on then. We're going to move us on to Act 2. So, BeetleJude. So, Act 2, we have a Thargoid attack, right? A Thargoid, they come in some force, and this is where we have the whole story with the Alexandria. Can you give us a quick overview of that and what happened and, you know, the Alexandria, all this sort of shenanigans?
Yeah, they hit the Pleiades, and it's not like they don't hang around there anyway. But they went for Delphi, and where they'd been basically just piling up Guardian artifacts Aegis had on their front lawn for ages, getting everyone to just chuck Guardian artifacts at them. And as we know, the Thargoids not so fond of the Guardians, So the Alexandria megaships just chock-a-block full of all this tasty cargo. So they up sticks and they head off. I'm assuming they're going to their base, which is Sol, which is Aegis core, is it? Anyway, they're going to Sol anyway. They go to a couple of places, but the Thargoids follow them and leads to the Federation saying, we will shoot you down if you come into Federation space with your Thargoids. You stay well away. And so that's they're sort of hanging around there and decide to go somewhere really quiet with just one little prison colony where nobody minds if anything bad happens. And they, rather than getting the commanders who gave them all the Guardian artifacts to take the Guardian artifacts to the place and then making their frameshift jump, they decide to do it themselves, knowing that there's all these Thargoids following them. Anyway, so they do. And needless to say, shenanigans. They didn't turn up.
They just disappeared, right?
Disappeared.
So,
they weren't there when
a couple of interesting talking points on this one. The first thing I want to ask is, and chat, I'm also asking this to you, what do you think about the Federation's role in this? They refused entry to the Alexandria into their space. What do you think of that decision? Was that a good decision, a bad decision on the Federation's part?
Well, if they were concerned that Sol was going to get attacked by Thargoids if they let the Alexandria come through, then I suppose in a way it was quite a good decision. It's a slightly puzzling decision given that they're actually funding, or partly funding, Aegis. So why was Aegis taking a load of Guardian stuff to Sol in the first place? It seems an unusual place to do your research. Fair enough, Aegis core is based there, but there's plenty of other Aegis locations. It seemed really odd to be taking all that massive 400,000 tons of Guardian artifacts to Sol. I can understand the Federation not being particularly keen.
That's fair enough. I'm just seeing it. Someone in chat, Andreu, says it was clear that the Alexandria is bait for Thargoids in advance. How do we feel about that? TatorTot, do you buy into that theory that the Alexandria might have been bait for Thargoids?
I mean, I remember the first time I read about us bringing Guardian items to the megaship. And I'm like, there's no way anything bad could happen from that. Absolutely no way. Could it have been bait? Possibly. But it also could have just been Aegis just being incompetent. I don't know. I've not heard that theory before. It's got me thinking now, and I'm intrigued by that.
Dude, any thoughts on this whole, not just that, the whole Alexandria situation? Maybe, what do you think happened to the Alexandria? Do you think I'm not going to put words in your mouth. What do you think happened to the Alexandria?
I think they got hyperdicted and destroyed, as was expected. I don't think they went anywhere secret. I think that they got smashed into tiny pieces.
Interesting. Any other theories on our board, on our table?
I think that we will eventually find the Alexandria. It might not be for a while, but I think we might find it at some point. And certainly the idea of using Guardian artifacts as bait for Thargoids might be something that we found a little bit later on in the story. So that's a kind of interesting thought. In this case, though, I think Aegis had been refused funding. It had Edmund Mahan of the Alliance had been trying to get the Sirius Accord signed and had failed. Which meant that Aegis was being defunded. Aegis needed to prove its value by developing some new weaponry. And for whatever reason, they wanted to go down the Ramtar route of using Guardian artifacts to build anti-Xeno weapons. So competent or not, I don't know. if they're not competent, then Salvation, who asked us to do exactly the same thing a little bit later on in the story, would he be incompetent too? Probably.
Interesting. Bruce is smirking in the background.
It's a good question. Although some would say, Aegis lost their megaship, whereas Salvation hasn't. That might be a distinguishing feature.
That's true.
It's hard to say. I think BeetleJude raised an interesting question, which is why would Aegis be so keen to put all their eggs in one basket and hoard the artifacts rather than have commanders deliver them directly? I won't propose any answers to that question, but it is an interesting one to ponder. Was it just bad decision making, or was there a reason behind it? It's not clear.
Very interesting. Okay, I'm gonna move on because of the time. I'm conscious of it. So, Wotherspoon. Next up, so the Alexandria has disappeared. Next up, Salvation asked players to track down potential survivors from the Hesperus. Can you talk a little bit about this whole act and the whole sort of gathering of more artifacts and what went on there?
Yes. So, let me think now. So, Salvation went away for a little while with the logs that he got from the Hesperus, and then after a while he popped up again and said, "Hey, there were survivors from the ship. We've worked out that there were survivors. There was it was Pharma Sapien attacked the people on the megaship who worked for Azimuth, but an Anaconda got away. Go and find that ship. It's somewhere nearby." And there were some beacons to follow, and we followed the beacons, and we eventually came in the Trapezium Sector. We came across an Anaconda which had landed and had been converted into a makeshift base, and it was on an absolutely unique planet, because it was a planet, the only one that I think I'm aware of, where there were both Guardian and Thargoid remains. There were two big Guardian sites, and there were a number of crashed Thargoid interceptors. And it appears that this is the site of a million-year-old battle between the Thargoids and Guardians. And so it transpires at that point that what Azimuth has been looking for is alien technology that they convert into weaponry. They want to build some sort of weapon. They're not talking about using weapons against Thargoids or against aliens. They're developing a weapon that they can use against people, I guess. So they find the Guardian technology. They find sort of the I think they're called relics, are they? The things that are on the tops of big pylons. Yep. They manage to get one of them down and convert it into a weapon. And when they do a test firing of the weapon, it burns them all. Some of them survive for a few days, but basically they die. And this is still 190 years ago from the present day. So they've managed to prove that there is some immense power in the Guardian technology that can be used to create a really powerful weapon. But they die being unable to get back in touch with Azimuth, and they actually die thinking, perhaps we don't want Azimuth to learn about this. This is too powerful. This is the sort of weapon we don't want humanity to be playing with. So at that point, both Aegis and Salvation get really excited. Albert Ezra of Aegis gets really excited, and Salvation, well, this was Salvation's game plan all along to find this, clearly. They both set up megaships in a nearby system, and they say, we want as many Guardian things as you can get all that Guardian stuff, because we're going to research weapons. And so there was competitive CG, which by some margin Salvation won, for whatever reason. So Aegis was really left in a pretty bad state. That they seemed to have lost support compared with the previous time with the Alexandria, where they had lots of support. This time, perhaps commanders thought, "Hey, you lost the last stuff we brought to you. We don't trust you this time. We'll go with the Salvation guy." I don't know, but anyway, Salvation ended up sort of with this massive hoard. Again, it's about 400,000 tons of Guardian relics and other technology, which he was going to take away and to build a weapon.
Indeed. So yeah, that's a summary of that act. I guess that is the interesting question. Chat, I'll ask the question to you. Who did you side with in that scenario, and why did you? Because I think this is a point. and correct me if I'm wrong, Table, like that it became quite clear that the general public, the commanders, really didn't trust Aegis anymore. Most of them were happy and willing to give the salvation a shot, right? That's what the results showed, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, go on, Crispy.
I was just gonna say that's what the results of those that participated showed. Personally, I didn't participate in that one because I'm I wouldn't say pro Thargoid, but I'm anti. Let's just kill them and develop weapons and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I didn't participate in helping any of those organizations. So.
Yeah.
It was also.
I'd be curious to know how many players purposefully refrained.
That's true. Wotherspoon, did you have something there?
Yeah, there were a couple of things. Number one, it was a long way away. The Trapezium Sector is really hard to get to because there's lots of permit locked systems in between. So you need a fairly long jump range to get there. The other thing I think that was perhaps problematic for Aegis is that they arranged to make the reward that Salvation was offering hot. In other words, they made it illegal to win the reward from Salvation. Right. And I think that may have turned a number of commanders against them because that seemed a bit of an underhand trick.
Yeah, and that is a good point. Someone in the chat also made a similar point, is that Salvation at this point, Bruce, this is when we saw the first of Salvation's weapons. He was offering a weapon which seemed to probably help sway the votes in his favour, right? I would imagine.
Yes, that's right. I've referred to Salvation as he twice now, and I've seen the responses in the chat. I'm just accidentally using gendered language where I shouldn't. Please don't read into that more than I mean for you two.
Yeah.
Can I actually point out?
Sure.
Can I actually point out that that there are two Galnet stories which refer to Salvation as he. So
okay, that's interesting.
Interesting.
But the point I was going to make is that, Salvation has, at this point, deliberately made siding with them as tempting as possible with tangible rewards that Aegis couldn't offer. So, yes, in the form of unique anti-Xeno weaponry. And, I've seen a few comments to that effect as well. So that's probably played a strong role in some of the decisions that were made.
Yeah.
There was a comment I was trying to find that was... I can't remember who said it, so apologies, I can't credit you in the Twitch chat, but... I liked this idea, which was, what if Salvation had used the Guardian artifacts to provoke some of the Thargoid attacks to then suit his own, their own purposes? So, for example, being able to predict and respond to some of the attacks. That's a really nice idea. What do we make of that?
I subscribe to that, definitely. There was again, we're jumping ahead a little bit, but in the recent events in Cornsar, there's definitely Guardian stuff kicking around there. It's either remains of Guardian technology or it's materials that you can pick up from a number of sites in the Cornsar system. Somebody, intentionally or otherwise, has been bringing Guardian materials in there. So if you were able to predict that there's going to be a Thargoid attack, and you can predict that because there's Guardian stuff there already, then perhaps that could be Salvation that did that, or it could be some other explanation. Who knows? But I think it's Salvation.
BeetleJude, what do you think? Do you think that could potentially be Salvation? He's sort of using these things to bait in Thargoids or do anything like that?
We really don't know what he's up to, do we? We're really not sure. It does really look that way, though, doesn't it? It looks like he's set a trap and it's a pantomime. He's performing this whole thing. I don't know.
A lot of people say that. A lot of people think that Salvation and the way that they speak is very sort of showy or like not natural. Does anyone else subscribe to that theory, or is that something that you don't really think about too much?
I hadn't really noticed that, to be honest.
So might want to have a look, have a reread through some of his messages. A lot of people think that TatorTot's not in their head. Do you buy into that? On YouTube?
It's new to me. Like I said, what I saw in chat as far as Salvation referring to to us as humanity and not us, it's kind of making me want to go back and reread and see if I've missed anything as far as just how Salvation is saying.
Well, that's good.
Like that.
That's the entire point of the stream, Tater Tot. Right. So I'm looking at the time. I think I've decided, Bruce, and feel free. I feel like I don't want to cut conversation short or skip over things. And I'm conscious that we're not going to get to the end of the Azimuth Saga we're up to in this stream because we've only got less than 10 minutes. But I do just want to. I think we can do this on another stream, and carry it on another stream, and we just carry on as is. That's what I think we should do. Bruce, how do you feel, mate?
Sure, seems totally fair to me if our guests are happy with that suggestion. I'm in two minds. I'm either thinking we save the rest for a future stream and just continue down some of the rabbit holes we've already opened up, or we touch very lightly on recent events just so that anyone watching is brought up to speed and can then look into it. I'm in two minds.
That's good. I guess let's briefly touch on current events then, because I agree that's probably good. If you're a new player, we'll try and catch you up with what's just happened, and then we'll have another stream where we go a bit more in depth over the things that we might have missed out today. So in terms of, I guess, the very latest and quite a big thing that happened is in the Cornsar system. And we've just touched on it, kind of. We maybe just touched on it, there's a theory. Wotherspoon, can you quickly give us a sort of rundown of what's just happened in the story in terms of the Cornsar system and, the Thargoids?
Yeah, okay, so we know that Salvation was busily developing this wonderful new weapon. Well, he then so quite recently, it was on the 14th of September, which was a Tuesday, he said, "Hey guys, the Thargoids are going to attack the Cornsar system. Evacuate all the people now." And the people in the Cornsar system, which is an agricultural system, said, "Well, why should we do that? I mean, so there haven't been any Thargoids here ever. They've never been anywhere near here. There's nothing here that would interest them." And so they ignored his warning. And 2 days later, on Thursday, the 16th of September, the Thargoids attacked in a really big way. The two big starports in that system were attacked and damaged in the way that we've become accustomed to, and there were loads and loads and loads of Thargoids all over the system. Which was kind of quite impressive. They were quite fun to go and go and
there was a lot of them.
There was a lot of combat going on, and of course IDA was able to do its thing, and sort of there were lots of things for people to get involved in, but it only lasted for a weekend. And the reason it only lasted for a weekend is that on the Friday, which is the day after the Thargoids attacked, Salvation sent out a message to the people who'd helped him in the past and said, I'm assembling a secret weapon which is going to wipe out the Thargoids in the Cornsar system. And what I need you to do is go to this neighbouring system. There's one of my megaships there. Load up with what they call basic medicines. What that really is all the components of this massive weapon I'm going to build. And if you can get it to the rescue ships in Cornsar, I'll assemble this weapon and we will wipe out the Thargoids. And on the Monday following this, the Thargoids just vanished. If you looked on the surface of the planets, there were loads of crashed Thargoids, but not a single Thargoid left alive. A couple of days later, Salvation said, "Yeah, that was me. I did that." There's no direct evidence that he did it, but it is quite an unusual thing to happen. And so it does appear that Salvation may well have developed this weapon that the guy from way back 194 years ago said, "I hope humanity never finds this weapon," and he's been able to use it against the Thargoids.
It's an interesting point you make, that there is no actual evidence, so he may just be, again, this might just all be a show, but there is, you can kind of put two and two together. Chat, I'm interested in your thoughts on this one as well. But I guess, again, the question comes up then, do you think Salvation baited the Thargoids into this system to then, potentially test a weapon? Or do you think that they knew that the Thargoids were coming anyway? Jude, what do you think about this whole scenario?
Well, if he knew that there was going to be where the Hesperus was, then conceivably he's got a good way of finding out these things. He may have known there was going to be an attack, so it doesn't necessarily need to be foul play. Right. But there were an awful lot of Guardian artifacts there, and we know they don't take kindly to Guardian artifacts. So.
Yeah, that's a good point, because there was a lot of, like you mentioned, sort of Guardian artifacts found in the debris of a lot of destroyed ships, which is a pretty nice clue in terms of what may or may not be happening with the Thargoids and their interests. So yeah, that is a fair point to raise. TaytorTot, what are your thoughts on this whole ordeal in Cornsar?
My thoughts are very tinfoily here. I'm thinking that Salvation actually took the Alexandria and has possession of it and used the Guardian stuff on it to then bait the Thargoids to that system. And then obviously used his very effective weapon. Mm-hmm. And I'm gonna say committed genocide. That's my opinion. I'm not a Thargoid sympathizer, but I think it's a little much.
You're not the only person to have that idea, for sure. I've seen that a lot. Yeah, Tall in the chat says I'm with Crispy on this one. Break says, how do we know the Guardians weren't the bad guys? Like, there's a lot of interesting questions in the chat, so well done chat for bringing these up. So we've got a couple minutes left before we cut to the end of today's stream. Is there any final thoughts on Cornsar quickly? Anything that I've not mentioned that you want to quickly talk about in terms of Cornsar?
I suppose, to be fair to Salvation, he claims that he is developing a new early warning system to find out about Thargoid attacks. Mm-hmm. So it might be that he has that as well. The thing that worries me more than anything else is that he's saying, I'm developing this wonderful new weapon and it's top secret and it's still in development and I'm not going to share it with you. It's my weapon.
Right.
So,
but he is giving commanders new anti-Xeno weapons that they can use. He's not talking about this potential thing, but he is giving them something.
That's true, and that's fair. That does suggest that he is developing something new, although it may be in the early stages of development for us. But if he's got a weapon that powerful, does it only work against Thargoids, or is he going to become Dr. Evil in his volcano?
It's an interesting theory.
Very good question. I have another question based on the Cornsar events for each of our guests, actually. If it were the case that Salvation deliberately baited the Thargoids there somehow, let's go with Crispy's idea that Salvation's used Guardian artifacts, drawn the Thargoids in there, and then used the super weapon to sort of make a point. Let's call that scenario A, and then scenario B is it's all above board. There is no foul play. Salvation, through some other means, determined that there was going to be an attack there, and then essentially saved the Cornsar system more legitimately. If it were later discovered that either one of those cases were true, would it sway your opinion of Salvation in terms of their intent and authenticity? I'll start with, I'll pose that to BeetleJude first.
Do you know what? The Thargoids have attacked lots of systems, small systems that really haven't elicited this sort of massive response in that way. It does seem extreme, doesn't it? And potentially dramatic. Does sort of suggest that regardless of which one it is, whether he's just trying to be the big I am or whether he is actually manipulating events. Either way, he has like Crispy pointed out, he has done a really pretty grim thing, I suppose. So it doesn't make you warm to him terribly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But
That's fair. Crispy, any thoughts on that?
I'm inclined to agree with Jude there. I don't think it really has any. I don't think it would really change my feelings on it. I think I kind of made up my mind about salvation before that even happened.
Okay. Fair enough. Wotherspoon?
I'm not so sure. Obviously, you're a scenario A where he's sort of manipulating things, actually bringing in the Thargoids, allowing them to kill a load of people, and then wiping them out as a big demonstration. That's pretty Dr. Evil. If it is above board and he's developing technology that we can use to fight the Thargoids in some relatively sort of okay sort of way, I mean, it's still difficult. It's still the nuclear option, isn't it? It's still using a weapon that's a bit like the mycoid virus. It wipes out the species in the system. But I could potentially have some sympathy for him, and if his intention is to drive the Thargoids off somehow and save a lot of lives, well, that's a worthy thing to want to do. I'm just still a bit suspicious about his motives.
Yeah.
Would he have deployed the weapon had the pilots had all commanders turned up in drove in their AX squadrons in readiness for this attack that he said was going to happen in the Cornsar system? If everyone had rocked up and stood there waiting with their guns, do you think he'd have deployed his mega weapon?
See, this is an interesting point because the Thargoids initially showed up in fewer numbers, and that caused actually a lot of the anti-Xeno commanders and to actually not feel like they needed to head over there. So it wasn't actually as well defended as you might think from a Thargoid attack. What then happened the day after was the rest of the Thargoids then arrived, and then the anti-Xeno players and commanders joined the Cornsar system. So there was BeetleJude is 100% right. There was a period there where it seemed like there was no or not as much defense as you would expect from independent commanders, and obviously Aegis at that point were partly suspended, so they weren't there either.
Yeah, that's true actually. In fact, a lot of the anti-Xenu people turned up, and then they went away again because they thought, hey, there's only a few Thargoids here. Yep. It's not really something that we need to deal with.
It's also true that Aegis ignored Salvation's initial warning and prediction along with the people of the Cornsar system, so there were no Aegis-backed ships ready to fight Thargoids either.
That's true, but then to be fair to Aegis, they don't have any money. They're unfunded and they're partially suspended.
Sure.
I wouldn't necessarily lay that at their door. I might lay it at the Federation, the Empire, who failed to fund them properly.
Mm-hmm.
Reasonable.
Well, I guess I'll call it there. It's always impossible to cut these conversations because I feel like we could continue talking. Sure. But there is so much more for us to talk about in the Azimuth Saga chat. So if you are new to it and you want to catch up before we do the second part of this stream, probably in a few weeks' time, !Azimuth in the Twitch chat will send you to the forum post, which gives you a nice rundown with some Galnet articles of how you can catch up. You can also obviously explore in game and find some things to read and listen to in game too. But yeah, we'll end for now. We'll put a stop on the show for now. But I'm really enjoying this conversation. I'm looking forward to continuing this as soon as possible. Chat, I hope you enjoyed this one, and again, you're looking forward to potential second part of this Azimuth discussion. So before we go, then I just want to obviously say a big thank you to our guests who joined us as always. So we'll start with Crispy. Thank you obviously for joining us, Crispy. Where can people find you over on the internet?
You can find me over on Twitch, CrispyTaytorTot, Twitter, TikTok.
Nice.
Yeah, so all over the place.
Twitch.tv/CrispyTaytorTot. If you put !guests in the chat, you'll get a link to all of our guests' channels. And BeetleJude, where can people find you on the internet?
I'm often reading out stuff on Galnet News Digest, and I have my own YouTube where I do pictures of planets.
Yeah, is that how do we find that?
You're right. I think BeetleJude into YouTube. I am my channel's YouTube /C/BeetleJude.
Cool. If one of the mods wants to throw that in the chat, feel free. Thank you, BeetleJude and Wotherspoon.
But that's not about stuff. That's not about like game news or anything.
That's fine.
You do talk about in-game stuff. And
I talk about the shape of a spine occasionally, or
as you do that.
It's a wonderful channel. You all should go check it out. Wonderful art about Elite Dangerous.
And Crispy, you yourself do some marvelous YouTube videos.
Oh yeah, I do. Yeah, I'm also on YouTube.
I do YouTube as well sometimes, which is Galnet News Digest. If you just search for Galnet News Digest, you will find BeetleJude and my news channel for Elite Dangerous and everything that happens in Elite Dangerous.
Nice. Yeah, so once again, thank you everybody for joining us. Thanks, Bruce, as always. Any final words, Bruce? We like to end the streams with a piece of wisdom from yourself.
I don't know about wisdom. I would like to thank our guests so much for coming on. We really appreciate this. It's been a lot of fun. My only sort of regret is that we didn't get the chance to touch on more topics. So it would be great to have you back if you would be willing. I know there were some things like the Heifetz cache stuff, for instance. There's so much to delve into there, as well as some of the other topics in the narrative. So that would be great. But yes, no, thank you to our guests, and thank you as well for watching, everyone. We really appreciate it. And we hope you'll join us for our next stream on Tuesday.
Indeed. So, as Bruce said, thank you everyone for joining us. We'll be back next week, and we'll let you know as soon as we know about the next one of these narrative roundtable streams, because we love doing them. So yeah, until then, please stick around while we try and find somebody to raid. As always, if we do raid somebody, please be kind, as we expect from all of you. And yeah, until then, have a nice day, fly safe. 07 Commanders.
07.
07 everyone.